So the question of what hip arthritis is comes up in terms of what it actually is when you look at it. Um, we have a coating over our joints that is made up of cartilage, and cartilage is that kind of pearly white stuff at the end of a chicken bone, if you've ever looked at it. And that is the coating that makes the slippery surfaces rub together, and it's really not very thick, so it's anywhere from say 3 to 4 millimeters thick, and it's on both sides of the joint, and it wears out much like a car tire would wear out. And once you get down to the level of the bone where the last millimeter of cartilage wears off, you'll hear that phrase bone-on-bone arthritis, and that's when the cartilage surface has worn off, and now you're rubbing a semi-hard surface of the bone against another hard surface, and that is essentially the definition of what arthritis is. A hip replacement is typically, in the case for what we're talking about for a total hip replacement, there is a ball and a socket joint that makes up your hip, and it's a reasonably large ball, and it's a reasonably large socket, and we end up replacing both sides of that. So the socket ends up having a metal shell and a plastic liner, and the femoral component, or the thigh bone component, has a head ball and what we would call a stem. And a lot of people may not know this, but your bones are kind of hollow, and particularly your thigh bone is hollow in the middle, and it's a lot like a pipe. So the structure of it, or the strength of it, comes from the outside of the pipe, and the center essentially has bone marrow, but we utilize that to try and place the hip replacement, or the stem for the femur, inside the middle of that pipe, and we essentially wedge it in there, and then attach our ball to it, and replace the socket, and it has a piece of plastic, and the two of them go together to make your hip replacement. So what are the expectations that you might have the day of surgery? What actually happens? A lot of times you get there, or pretty much you get there about an hour or two before the actual surgery time, meet the anesthesiologist, meet the team that's working in the operating room with you, and get kind of set up for the procedure. We come by and discuss any questions that you might have before the procedure. The operating room time is about an hour and a half from the time you go into the room till the time you leave the room, and that is time going to sleep, or often getting a spinal anesthetic, so you just get your legs to sleep. The procedure itself takes that hour, and then the half hour of time to kind of wake up and get out into the recovery room. And you'll spend about an hour in the recovery room, and then up to your room where you'll meet your family, and the physical therapist will meet you there too to get you up the same day. Why the anterior approach? Why that versus the standard approach? I have done both. I started doing the posterior approach, or the standard approach, and that entails going through a fair amount of muscle. The big one would be your gluteus maximus, and then taking down some of the muscles that stabilize your hip to gain access to the hip joint. And during that procedure, we end up getting a single x-ray and making what I would say is an estimation about where the components will go. And the anterior approach changed all of that. We have the anterior approach where we come between the muscles rather than splitting through them or doing damage to them. We don't take down any of the hip stabilizers, so it ends up being a little bit more of a stable hip. And then we have an intraoperative x-ray that is continuous, so we take multiple pictures to make sure that we get that hip replacement right where we want it every time, and it's very reproducible. And that is probably one of the major advances or advantages for an anterior approach. We know exactly where our components are going, and there's no guesswork involved. So what's the long-term expectation of a hip replacement? Certainly our goal is to get you to the point where you have essentially no restrictions. You can do whatever you want and essentially have confidence that your hip's going to do it for you. A return to what I would say are normal activities of walking and hiking and playing golf and even playing tennis or some more high-impact sports are things that we expect. And to be able to do it without the nagging pain that you might have that you came in with, that pain would be gone. And we're able to achieve that in such a way that people say, I really don't have any sensation that I have a hip replacement at all, and it's no longer a nuisance to them.